Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. Crimson bled across the sky's bruised canvas as twilight claimed the ridges, and it was then, against the deepening violet, that I registered the other silhouette waving from the far side of the chasm. This wasn't right. Solitude was the compact I'd made with this wilderness. Not here, not this deep into the skeletal heart of October, not leagues from any map-marked settlement. My GPS, before surrendering its ghost, had etched its final testament. Plutude 17N 122 to 48W, Oregon's vast, unblinking eye. 30 miles measured in switchbacks and silence from the nearest whisper of town. The airwaves dead static, only my own breath, the heft of my pack, and now, impossibly, this distant greeter. 3 sunrises had marked my solo passage since leaving the Umpqua trailhead Monday morn. Now, Wednesday evening drew its cloak tight, sustenance for perhaps 4 more rotations of the earth remained. 40 degrees Fahrenheit whispered promises of frostbite when darkness truly fell. My essentials were cataloged: shelter, warmth, filtration, sutures, bearings, fire, the litany of self-reliance. The stranger occupied a stony prominence maybe half a mile across the gulf. Dark shell, burdened frame, perhaps capped by a hat. The details swam in the failing illumination. Yet the gesture was stark, undeniable. Both arms scissoring the air above their head, a frantic semaphore for aid. Hesitation coiled in my gut. Trail scripture preached succor, yet an internal dissonance hummed, a primal tremor beneath the ribs. My neck muscles went taut. A clammy dew sprang on my palms, mocking the chill. The figure persisted, waving, the same metronomic arc endlessly replayed. "Hoy there!" The shout ripped from my throat, swallowed by the valley's immensity, returning thin and frail. Silence answered, save for the wind's sigh and that relentless, automated wave. Prudence dictated retreat, camp, the clarity of dawn. But the phantom limb of guilt twitched. What if? Abandonment was a stain I couldn't bear. My timepiece read 6:47 p.m., half an hour, perhaps, before the light completely bled away. They were positioned above me, a steep 500-foot differential. 20 minutes, fueled by adrenaline, might bridge the gap. "On my way!" I bellowed, receiving only the ceaseless gesticulation in reply. Slinging the pack's weight back onto protesting shoulders, I began the ascent. The path serpentined upwards, a treacherous ribbon of shifting scree. My boots skidded on the loose gravel, each step a gamble. Cold air met hot sweat soaking my inner layers. Breath tore through my lungs in ragged bursts. Above, unwavering, the silhouette performed its tireless pantomime. Arms aloft, arms descending, up, down. A wind-up automaton left on the roof of the world. At 7:02 p.m., lungs burning, I crested the ridge, arriving at the precise point geometry had dictated. Emptiness greeted me. Bare trail, wind-scoured scrub, and beyond, a precipitous plunge into shadow. "Hello?" My voice a dry rasp. Nothing. The light wasn't failing now. It had failed. Umbral tides flooded the valley floor. The cold intensified, biting. I fumbled for my headlamp, its beam slicing a weak cone into the oppressive black. And then I saw it, planted squarely in the trail's center, a solitary hiking boot. Men's size 11, a Merrell, its condition incongruously new. Just the one, placed with an almost ceremonial care. I lifted it, laces neatly tied, interior bone dry. Not a scuff, not a smear of mud or blood marred its surface. A pristine artifact in terra nullius. A tremor started in my hands. The boot felt wrong, impossibly light, unnaturally clean. I let it fall, stumbling back. The sun's last ember winked out behind the western peaks. Darkness slammed down like a lid. My headlamp beam felt inadequate, a fragile probe against an infinite wall. Shelter immediately. The nearest viable patch, a small pine-sheltered flat I'd noted during the climb, lay 10 minutes back down the treacherous slope. The boot sat sentinel, a silent mockery. I turned, commencing a stumbling, half-controlled jog downwards. The headlamp's beam danced crazily, conjuring phantoms from rocks and roots. Every snapped twig, every dislodged pebble jolted through me like current. By 7:23 p.m., I reached the clearing. Never had my shelter sprung up so quickly, fingers clumsy with haste, poles clicking into place, the fly sheet secured like a prayer. Huddled inside, I coaxed the emergency radio to life, knowing its futility. Static hissed back, an indifferent void across all frequencies. I choked down a dense energy bar, sipped water, desperately seeking logic's anchor. A prank? Local youths. But the sheer remoteness argued against it, and that waving, that inhuman persistence. Sleep was a foreign country. I sat rigid, back braced against my pack, knife clutched tight, its cold steel a meager comfort. The tent fabric felt terrifyingly permeable. Each sigh of the wind through the pines morphed into stealthy footfalls. Then at 2:17 a.m., they became real, slow, measured steps crunching on the gravel outside. Approaching from the ridge's direction, drawing nearer, halting just beyond the thin nylon wall. Breath caught in my throat, knife handle slick in my grip. The steps commenced a slow circle around the tent. Once, twice, 3 times. The rhythm never varied, a clockwork tread. Then stillness directly before the zippered entrance. A human-shaped density pressed against the fabric, visible as a distortion in the faint starlight filtering through. Minutes stretched into elastic eternities. The shadow remained utterly motionless. At 5:46 a.m., the first frail light painted the eastern canvas. The shadow had dissolved. I waited another 30 minutes, heart-hammering, before daring to unzip the door. The clearing lay undisturbed, no impressions in the damp earth, no trace, except placed meticulously before my tent's threshold. The second boot, the left one, a perfect pair. Camp breakdown was a blur of frantic efficiency. Breakfast forgotten, gear hurled into the pack. I fled onto the main trail, aiming for the distant promise of the ranger station, 18 miles hence. The day dawned crystalline and cold, sun glinting, birdsong mocking the night's terrors. An illusion of normalcy, but the previous evening's climb had left my legs leaden. Hourly rests became necessities. At every pause, my eyes scoured the high ridges, searching for that telltale semaphore. It was 2:30 p.m. when I heard them. Footsteps falling behind me on the trail, the same cadence, that clockwork rhythm from the night, closing the distance. Panic detonated. I ran, pack slamming against my spine, lungs screaming for air. The footsteps matched my pace, relentless, unhurried, never closer, never farther, just there. I ran until the world tilted, legs buckling, collapsing beside the trail in a gasping heap. The footsteps ceased directly behind me. I twisted around, braced for a nothing. Only empty trail receding into the timber. But resting on a nearby boulder lay a note. Plain white paper, stark typing. 4 words. Thank you for coming. Sunset saw me stumbling into the ranger station, spilling out the disjointed narrative. They mounted a search, found nothing. No boots, no note, no hiker, no disturbance in the wilderness's weave. Missing persons reports yielded no match. Satellite imagery showed only trees and rock, just the wild. 3 months have dissolved since then. My hiking days are over. The gear mostly sold, but the note remains secreted in a desk drawer. Sometimes in the dead hours I retrieve it, tracing the fade-in type. Thank you for coming. The paper yellows. Last week, a parcel arrived. No sender. Inside, a pair of hiking boots. Men's size 11, Merrell's near virginal condition, and another typed message, ready for another hike. I incinerated the boots, fled my apartment, changed my number. Yesterday, driving home, gridlocked in twilight traffic, my rearview mirror captured it, a figure standing roadside, waving, both arms, that precise mechanical oscillation, up, down, up, down. I didn't slow, didn't look again, just drove, locked myself inside walls that suddenly felt inadequate. Because I know what follows. Tonight, tomorrow night, next week, the footsteps will return. That perfect, steady beat, drawing nearer. No more running. Now I grasped the gesture. The waving wasn't a plea for rescue. It was a greeting, a welcome. It knew even then what I couldn't. Once witnessed, once chosen. Escape becomes irrelevant. You integrate. Another watcher, waiting on another ridge. Another pair of boots, left as an offering on another empty trail. I commit this account as a warning. Should you wander alone and spy a distant figure waving, do not approach, do not offer aid, turn, flee, run while you still can, because proximity reveals the void, and by then the invitation is already accepted. The sun sinks low outside my window, down on the street, deserted save for one still form, arms raised, waving. The footsteps have begun. Same rhythm, ascending the stairs, closer now, down the hall, outside my door. It's time. Remember this. And if the wilderness beckons with waving arms, run. The letter materialized on an afternoon bleached of consequence, lying starkly within the mundane clutter of my mailbox. It was unexpected, a fatigued envelope, my name inscribed upon it in a precise, almost skeletal script. Within, sparse lines conveyed an improbable inheritance, an antiquated chalet nestled deep in mountain country, bequeathed by distant kin whose faces were blurred memories, footnotes in a family history I'd long since closed. That branch of the family tree had withered from my awareness years ago. No tendril of connection remained, or so I'd thought. Yet the ink was stark, the message unambiguous. I was the steward of this remote haven, a place pinned to a map I'd never consulted. Curiosity, perhaps, or the pragmatic whisper of resale value spurred me on. Whatever the catalyst, a bag was packed. The car pointed towards unfamiliar horizons. I reached the foothills as the sun bled behind jagged peaks, painting the bruised twilight sky in shades of slate and violet. A chill, sharp as fractured glass, kissed my face. There it sat, the chalet perched on a rise overlooking a shadowed valley. Decrepitude clung to it like ivy, steps splintered like old bones, paint peeling in leprous scales. A roof suggesting intimate acquaintance with the sky. Shutters hung askew like broken limbs. The grounds were a choked tangle of weeds and grass burnt brittle. A thin track, barely discernible, wound towards the entrance. It possessed the aura of a place long untouched by human passage, yet the letter insisted otherwise. I cut the engine near the porch, plunging myself into a silence so profound it felt like pressure against my eardrums. Not the chirp of a cricket, nor the sigh of wind through the pines. A vacuum. Slinging my bag over my shoulder, I ascended the porch steps. Each footfall elicited a groan from the protesting timbers, releasing the faint, cloying perfume of aged wood and settled dust. The key, companion to the letter, turned stiffly in the lock. The door yielded with a rasp, catching halfway, demanding a shoulder shove to grant entry. Inside, Stygian gloom reigned, fractured only by pale light bleeding through grime-streaked windows. My fingers traced the wall, searching for purchase, finding a loose switch. A single bulb sputtered overhead, casting a jaundiced, flickering glow down a narrow hallway. The walls were watermarked like old maps imprinted with the history of dampness. My shoes disturbed the thin shroud of dust, leaving clear prints. Then a disquieting detail snagged my attention. Other footprints. Disturbingly fresh, as if someone had walked this hall mere hours, perhaps minutes before my arrival. They led inexorably toward a room off to the right. I followed, drawn into what appeared to be a sitting room. A cavernous stone fireplace dominated one corner, its hearth cold, choked with the gray ghosts of long-dead fires. A dilapidated sofa slumped opposite, flanked by skeletal chairs. The footprints advanced into the room's heart, vanishing abruptly near the cold hearth. I crouched, peering closer, a prickle of ice tracing my spine. The dust there was disturbed, scuffed, as if someone, or something, had stood sentinel. But no tracks led away. A knot tightened low in my belly. Depositing my bag on the sofa's worn velvet, I sought more light, finding none, and prowled the room's perimeter. Shelves lined the walls, burdened with leather-bound volumes whispering of forgotten lore and a scattering of inscrutable objects. A uniform layer of dust coated everything, save for peculiar streaks, areas wiped clean with no discernible purpose. I brushed a finger across a shelf. The dust clung like a shroud. Abruptly, a soft thump resonated behind me, the sound of wood tapping wood. I spun, heart leaping. Nothing. Emptiness greeted me. My inaugural night began in deceptive quietude. Upstairs, I claimed a small bedroom, marginally less burdened by dust than its counterparts. My suitcase found a perch on a rickety chair. Cracking the window yielded a sliver of frigid air. I stripped the bed of its musty linens, half expecting to uncover relics of lives lived, photographs, letters, but the drawers yawned empty. The wardrobe harbored only a few moth-ravaged jackets. A corner lamp flickered to life, its weak illumination pushing back the shadows meagerly. Around midnight, a sharp crackle like knuckles rapping on wood jolted me awake. Simultaneously, I registered a distinct warmth suffusing the air. Sitting bolt upright, I scanned the room. An unnatural orange pulse emanated from below. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth turned to parchment. Flashlight in hand, I crept down the protesting stairs. The glow intensified, bleeding from the sitting room. Turning the corner, I froze. A robust fire danced within the hearth's stone maw, consuming logs I had certainly not placed there. Heat radiated outwards, warming my face. A frantic scan of the floor confirmed my dread. The footprints I'd discovered earlier were obliterated, overlaid with a scatter of new ash and wood chips. Someone had been here. Someone had kindled this fire. My hand trembled as I grasped the iron poker, stirring the logs, seeking... What? An explanation? None offered itself. After minutes spent mesmerized by the hypnotic flames, I retreated upstairs, leaving my bedroom door ajar. Sleep now, a distant country. Morning found me stiff-necked, head throbbing dully. The fire was extinguished, leaving only cold cinders. I stepped outside, seeking solace in the crisp air. Sunlight gilded the mountain crests, a breathtaking panorama utterly at odds with the unease coiling within me. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered panes, no splintered frames. Only the front door, which I myself had unlocked. I resolved to spend the day meticulously exploring the chalet's recesses, hunting for clues to my unseen visitor. 2 floors and a cellar comprised the structure. Upstairs, beyond my temporary bedroom, lay 2 more chambers. One functioned as a study, a desk littered with aged papers, twin chairs, and towering shelves crammed with venerable books. I sifted through the documents, deeds, boundary disputes, references to familial names that echoed faintly from childhood whispers. A note detailed moisture damage necessitating repairs. Nothing suggested a caretaker or recent occupant. The adjacent room housed a gallery of portraits. Darkened varnish obscured details, yet the subjects, clad in austere, bygone fashions, commanded attention. Their expressions were unnervingly blank, their painted gazes possessing an itinerant quality, seeming to track my movements. Drawn to one, a man whose jawline and nose resonated with a vague familiarity, perhaps my grandfather. I leaned closer. The brushstrokes were visible, the face stern, the eyes fixed intently upon me. An icy fist clenched around my heart. My fingers brushed the frame. It shifted slightly on its nail. Downstairs encompassed a kitchen and a modest dining area. The kitchen appliances were relics, unlikely functional. Cabinets yielded dusty tins and crockery undisturbed for generations. In the dining room, a large table stood encircled by chairs. A stained cloth draped the table. The air hung thick with the ghosts of old meals, stale grease. One chair was angled away from the table, an invitation refused or recently vacated. The familiar tension seized my chest again. As afternoon bled towards evening, the urge to flee warred with a stubborn compulsion to remain. This place, unsettling as it was mine. And the mystery, it demanded attention. Was it a squatter, or was my own mind playing tricks? The basement beckoned. Its door near the kitchen groaned open, releasing an exhalation of damp earth and forgotten things. A bare bulb illuminated descending stairs, The cellar was compact, a workbench strewn with tools, crates stacked against sweating concrete walls. My flashlight beam danced across the floor. No footprints here, but gleaming faintly in the dimness, sinister metal hooks depended from the rafters, their purpose unclear. Curing meat, perhaps. More boxes huddled in a corner, labeled with dates and names, some stirring recognition. I pried one open. Old photographs, letters tied with faded ribbon, dusty keepsakes. Faces stared up from sepia prints, their expressions uniformly distant, silent. A heavy weight settled in my stomach as I sifted through these remnants of lives I barely knew. I lingered in the subterranean quiet longer than intended. By the time I surfaced, the sun was once again surrendering to the peaks. Hunger gnawed. I located matches and coaxed a reluctant burner on the ancient stove into sputtering life. Heating a can of soup, I ate standing, leaning against the counter, ears straining against the profound silence of the chalet. It was too quiet. That evening, I lit candles in the sitting room, the overhead bulb's erratic flickering grating on my nerves. Seated on the sofa, I watched shadows writhe and stretch upon the walls. My gaze kept returning to the empty fireplace, the memory of its spontaneous animation sending shivers down my spine. I resolved to stay awake, vigilant. Around 9, a faint skittering near the threshold sent my heart leaping. I rose, moving silently towards the hall. Nothing. The front door remained shut, the hallway dim. Then from above, the distinct groan of ancient timbers. A footstep on a loose board. Fists clenched, I tilted my head back, half expecting a face peering down from the landing. Only darkness. The thrum of my own pulse filled my ears. Ascending the stairs felt like traversing a living creature. Each step groaned its protest. Reaching the upper landing, I felt a draft, colder than the ambient air. The door to the portrait room stood slightly ajar, though I was certain I'd closed it. Inside, the painted eyes watched. My flashlight beam swept across them, then dropped to the floor. There, stark against the settled dust, were the faint impressions of bare feet. They led directly to a portrait in the corner, the severe man with the familiar jawline. My stomach twisted. I approached the painting. The footprints ceased precisely at the wall beneath it. Reaching out, my fingers found the bottom edge of the frame. It tilted forward easily. Behind it, nestled in the wall, was a cunningly disguised recess. Swallowing hard, I pushed the portrait aside. Within lay a leather-bound journal and a tiny, ornate key dangling from a loop of twine. The journal's cover felt stiff, cold to the touch. I opened it. Pages filled with a spidery, agitated script met my eyes. Whispers of family secrets, obscure traditions, and repeated references to the family's debt. One line leaped out: "He must return here when the time is right." My hand began to shake. I pocketed the journal and the key. Another creak echoed from the hallway. The door to the adjacent study seemed to drift inward fractionally, as if nudged by an unseen hand or a phantom breeze. I stared, heart pounding, then forced myself out of the room. Air. I needed air. I hurried downstairs, fumbled with the lock, and stepped onto the porch. The night air was sharp, biting. My breath plumed white in the darkness. I gazed at the hulking silhouettes of the mountains, my thoughts a frantic race. Who lit the fire? Whose naked feet trod these floors? What debt did this journal speak of? The chalet felt sentient, watchful, breathing silently at my back. No nocturnal animal sounds, no distant lights, just the immense quiet in this unsettling house. After regaining a semblance of composure, I went back inside, securing the door, checking the windows with obsessive care. Returning to the sitting room, I sank onto the sofa, forcing slow, deep breaths. The candles guttered, casting long, dancing shadows. I retrieved the journal. Its pages chronicled gatherings, hidden ledgers, and cryptic allusions to a presence inhabiting the chalet. The author detailed inexplicable footsteps, disembodied voices, furniture rearranging itself. An old promise demanding fulfillment. Reading the cramped script, a strange calm began to settle over my fear. Then a heavy scraping sound dragged across the floorboards directly above me, a chair being pulled. I shot to my feet, nearly upsetting a candle. Flashlight gripped tight, I raced upstairs again, shouting into the oppressive silence. "Is anyone there?" My voice died in the echoing corridors. No answer. In the study, the chair I'd noted earlier had indeed been moved. It now sat sentinel in the room's center, facing the doorway. Dust coated its seat, but the floor around its legs showed clear signs of recent disturbance. I backed away slowly, enough for one night. Retreating to my bedroom, I locked the door firmly behind me, setting the journal on the bedside table, tucking the small key beneath my pillow. Lying rigid in the darkness, I stared at the ceiling. Every creak, every settling groan of the old house sent jolts of adrenaline through me. My mind replayed the images, the footprints, the hidden compartment, the journal's ominous words. Sleep eventually claimed me, but it was a thin, restless veil. By the third night, the tension was palpable, pressing in from all sides. Objects migrated with greater frequency. Doors I'd shut stood open. Footsteps echoed from unoccupied rooms. The fireplace rekindled itself at unpredictable hours. I existed in a state of heightened alert, startled by the slightest sound, perpetually clammy despite the mountain chill. The house was watching, breathing down my neck. Faint whispers seemed to curl at the edge of my hearing, real or imagined. Passing the portraits became an ordeal. Their eyes felt like physical weights upon me. I kept the journal near, searching its pages for an anchor, an explanation. Those who inherit must answer the call. Read one passage. What call? I didn't know. I only knew I shared this space. Something wanted my attention. On the fourth night, near the bone-chilling hour of 2, I was wrenched from sleep by a frantic vibration seizing my bedroom doorknob. It began to rotate slowly, deliberately. The lock held. I sat frozen, heart hammering against my ribs, scarcely breathing. After a few agonizing seconds, the rattling ceased. Faint, receding impacts sounded on the floorboards outside my door. In that moment, the truth crystallized. This presence was no longer peripheral. It was immediate, tangible, right outside my door. I remain within these walls. Leaving feels impossible, tethered as I am by the need to understand what this place demands of me. The nights grow longer, more fraught. Each dawn reveals fresh evidence of my unseen cohabitant, a shifted object, a newly opened door, the lingering sense of passage in the air. The floorboards whisper beneath unseen weight. I feel its presence in the very marrow of the house. It is neither malevolent nor benign, but expectant, waiting. I delve deeper into the journal. into the chalet's shadowed corners, driven by fear, yes, but also by an inescapable conviction. This house holds a secret meant for me, and it will not release me until I decipher its riddle. The apparition stood roadside, a sodden silhouette against the deluge, thumb extended in a gesture of pure, rain-beaten hope. A wiser man, perhaps a less weary one, would have kept the accelerator pressed. Yet some confluence of empathy, morbid curiosity, or was it sheer, unadulterated folly, coaxed my foot towards the brake. In that instant, slowing the car on the slick asphalt, I couldn't fathom that this small surrender to conscience would unravel into the longest, most harrowing night of my existence. A descent that would leave me questioning not only that single choice, but the fragility of my own survival. The night wasn't merely dark, it was an inkwell spill, lashed by a tempest that mocked the very notion of shelter. Rain hammered the roof in relentless percussion. I was navigating the serpentine route home from a draining late shift at the clinic, the wipers battling a losing war against the downpour, their frantic sweeps merely smearing the watery chaos across the glass. Loneliness clung to the road, a ribbon of liquid obsidian disappearing into the maw of the storm. And then I saw her, poised at the tarmac's edge, utterly drenched, fabric plastered to a slight form. As the twin beams of my headlights caught her, she pivoted, her face a canvas of stark desperation, shadowed with fragile hope. My internal siren screamed caution, urged me onward, but a stubborn kernel of decency refused to abandon her to the elements. I eased the car onto the shoulder, stretching across the passenger seat to push the door open against the wind. "Where are you trying to reach?" My voice fought the gale's roar. She scrambled inside, a blur of motion and dripping fabric, collapsing into the seat with a breathless smile that seemed achingly genuine. "Oh, thank you, truly," she murmured, her voice thin as thread. Just aiming for the next town over, my car gave up the ghost a few miles back. A curt nod from me as I merged back into the desolate lane. "I'm Elias," I offered, attempting a veneer of normalcy over the disquiet churning within. "Lyra," she responded, twisting strands of long, dark hair, rivulets cascading onto the seat. Silence descended then, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the rhythmic drumming overhead and the hypnotic swoosh thump of the wipers clearing arcs of vision. Peripheral glances became my preoccupation. Something felt dissonant about her presence, an indefinable friction beneath the surface. "So," I ventured, seeking to dissipate the palpable tension, "what brings you out to this particular stretch of nowhere?" A subtle stiffening in her posture instantly smoothed over. "Ah, you know, seeing an old friend. Time just slipped away." I offered another non-committal nod, the explanation plausible yet somehow unconvincing. A faint tremor in her delivery snagged at my attention. Paranoia, I told myself. Just the late hour and the storm playing tricks. Focus on the road, Elias. But as the miles dissolved beneath the tires, Lyra's agitation became undeniable. Her gaze flickered constantly to the side mirror, darting between the receding darkness behind and the consuming void ahead. "Is everything all right?" I asked, the unease solidifying into genuine concern. "Yes, fine," she clipped out far too rapidly. "Just nerves, I suppose, being out this late." Before I could probe further, twin stars ignited in my rearview mirror, headlights approaching with alarming velocity, far too aggressive for the treacherous conditions. The vehicle materialized, a hulking dark SUV. Lyra witnessed its arrival simultaneously. She seemed to shrink into the seat, her breaths growing shallow and quick. "Could you maybe drive a bit faster?" The request trembled from her lips. Alarm bells now clanged insistently in my head. I depressed the accelerator, the engine whining in protest. "Lyra, what is happening? Who is that?" She shook her head, a frantic negative motion. "Please just go. I can't go back." The SUV loomed, impossibly close, its high beams flooding my cabin with blinding, invasive light, momentarily obliterating the road ahead. My heart hammered against my ribs. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp. What abyss had I stumbled into? With a sickening crunch, the SUV slammed into my rear bumper. The impact sent us lurching forward. I wrestled the wheel, fighting to maintain traction on the slick surface. Lyra let out a strangled cry, raw terror stark in her eyes. "Hold on," I shouted, wrenching the wheel to evade a second impact. But the SUV was a predator, relentless, glued to our tail regardless of my speed or evasive maneuvers. "Who are they?" I demanded, fear curdling with rising anger. "What do they want?" Tears streamed down Lyra's face now, words tumbling out between ragged sobs. "They're bad, very bad people. I got away. They want me back. Please, please don't let them catch me." My thoughts spun, a chaotic vortex. This woman, who was she? What maelstrom of trouble had she escaped? And more urgently, what vortex had I just steered myself directly into? Ahead, a narrow track snaked off the main road, vanishing into the dense woods. Impulse took over. I yanked the steering wheel hard, sending the car careening down the unlit path. The SUV followed, its bulk a disadvantage on the constricted track, allowing my smaller vehicle a slight edge negotiating the sharp turns. We plunged deeper into the arboreal gloom, trees flashing past like skeletal sentinels in the periphery. The SUV lagged slightly, its headlights still visible, bouncing erratically through the tangled woods behind us. "There's a town," Lyra said, her voice gaining a measure of steadiness. "Not far now. If we reach it, we should be safe." Grimly, I nodded, pouring every ounce of concentration into navigating the treacherous path. Rain continued its torrential assault. Twice the tires lost purchase, threatening to send us spinning into the abyss. But somehow, instinct and luck kept us tethered to the muddy track. After an eternity compressed into mere minutes, distant, scattered lights punctured the oppressive darkness. The town. A wave of profound relief washed over me as the first dilapidated structures emerged from the gloom. But the relief curdled almost instantly as we rolled onto what passed for the main street. An unnerving stillness gripped the air. The town was utterly deserted. Not a soul stirred, despite the hour being barely past midnight. Worse, the buildings themselves exuded decay. Windows were boarded shut, others sagged, bearing the unmistakable look of decades-long abandonment. "What is this place?" I murmured, easing off the accelerator, the car creeping through the spectral emptiness. Lyra scanned the surroundings wildly, a low moan escaping her. No, this isn't right. This can't be it. We must have taken a wrong turn somewhere." The hairs prickled on my nape. "Lyra," I began, my voice low and deliberate. "What is really going on?" Her answer was preempted by the roar of the SUV erupting onto the street behind us. In the rearview mirror's stark glare, I saw two figures spill out, silhouettes brandishing what were unmistakably firearms. "Drive!" Lyra shrieked. "Get us out of here!" I slammed my foot down, but instead of acceleration, the engine gave a pathetic sputter, coughed, and died. Empty. "Run!" I yelled, shoving my door open. We scrambled out, abandoning the useless vehicle, and bolted down the desolate street. We raced through the ghost town, the heavy thud of pursuing footsteps and angry shouts echoing ominously behind us. Lyra led, navigating the derelict landscape with a strange certainty that contradicted her earlier confusion. Rounding a corner, we confronted an ancient, crumbling church, its steeple clawing at the stormy sky. Without pausing, Lyra surged towards it, wrenching at the massive, groaning wooden door. I stumbled in after her, adding my weight to heave it shut just as our pursuers rounded the corner. The church interior was a cavern of shadows and stale air, thick with the dust of forgotten years. Lyra moved with unnerving purpose towards the altar, dropping to her knees, fingers scrabbling at a loose floorboard. "What are you doing?" I hissed, my eyes glued to the door, expecting it to burst inward at any second. "Getting what I came for," she muttered, reaching into the cavity revealed beneath the plank. When she rose, she held a small, intricately carved box and clutched tightly in her other hand a pistol. I recoiled, stumbling backward, my mind struggling to reconcile the desperate waif with the armed figure before me. "Lyra, what?" She turned, and the transformation was complete. Her eyes, moments before wide with terror, were now chips of ice, hard and calculating. "I'm sorry, Elias," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier tremor. "You seem decent enough, but I can't let them have this, and I can't afford loose ends." Outside, the heavy tread of boots approached the church entrance. Lyra leveled the gun, aiming squarely at my chest. Time seemed to warp, stretching into an agonizing crawl, every detail sharpened. The resolute set of her jaw, the metallic gleam of the weapon in the sepulchral light, the ornate box held like a sacred relic. I heard the ancient floorboards creak as the men breached the sanctuary, their labored breathing loud in the echoing space. Then pandemonium. The men burst fully into view, weapons raised. Lyra spun, firing with startling ferocity. I hurled myself behind a solid oak pew as bullets whined past, splintering wood, shattering stained glass. Dust and cordite choked the air. Amidst the chaos, I crawled frantically towards the rear of the church, desperate for an escape. My fingers brushed against fabric, a tattered curtain concealing a narrow doorway. I slipped slipped through, finding myself in a tight spiral stairwell, ascending into darkness. Up I climbed, driven by pure survival instinct, the cacophony of the firefight below gradually diminishing. Reaching the summit, the bell tower, I found a small, arched window offering a panoramic view. Far in the distance, genuine lights twinkled. A real town, civilization. Below, the gunfire abruptly ceased. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. I pressed myself flat against the cold stone wall, scarcely daring to breathe. Lyra emerged into the cramped space, streaks of blood stark against her pale skin. The box still clutched fiercely. Her eyes darted around, wild, before landing on me. For a protracted moment, silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken things. I thought I saw a flicker in her gaze. Remorse? Resignation? "I truly am sorry," she whispered, the words almost lost in the lingering resonance of violence. Then she turned and vanished back down the stairs. I waited, muscles locked, until the silence felt absolute, until I was certain she was gone. Gingerly, I descended from the tower, exiting the violated sanctuary into the preternatural quiet of the ghost town. There was no sign of Lyra, nor of the men who had hunted her. Guided by the distant pinpricks of light I'd glimpsed, I began to walk. It felt like traversing purgatory, but hours later, bruised and soaked, I stumbled into the outskirts of a living town, populated by actual people under functioning streetlights. I found the police, recounted my ordeal, the words sounding increasingly ludicrous even as I spoke them. Their skepticism was palpable. How could they believe such a tale? I never saw Lyra again. The mystery of the box, her true identity, the nature of her pursuers, these remain phantoms haunting the edges of my memory. But sometimes when the night is deep and the rain falls hard, the image of a solitary figure on a desolate roadside flashes before my eyes. I remember, and I drive on. The instant the void registered, twin absences where headlights ought to have blazed in my rear view, I grasped that this journey home would diverge sharply from the mundane. But understanding dawned too late. The pursuit's grim choreography was already in motion, and I was cast as the quarry. It was a Friday night dissolving under a sky-weeping rain. I was retreating from the city's late demands, an hour already devoured by the highway, when the drizzle thickened, escalating into a furious deluge. Before me the road stretched, a glistening black artery vanishing into impenetrable darkness. Night driving had always held a certain allure. The world contracted to the intimate triad of self, machine, and the unfolding path. Tonight, however, that tranquility curdled, replaced by an insidious tremor deep within. My first awareness of the other vehicle came, perhaps, 20 minutes into the storm's embrace. A sedan, deep-hued, obsidian or midnight blue, impossible to discern through the aquatic veil. What snagged my attention was the utter lack of illumination. In this downpour, such blindness wasn't merely reckless. It felt fundamentally wrong. How could its driver navigate the obscured world? Initially, dismissal was easy. A forgotten switch, perhaps, or some electrical gremlin. I anticipated the sudden bloom of lights or the vehicle pulling onto the shoulder. Neither occurred. It shadowed me, maintaining a steady interval of several car lengths, near enough for its silhouette to haunt my mirror, yet distant enough to conceal its occupant. I nudged the accelerator, coaxing a little more speed, hoping distance would swallow it. It mirrored my pace flawlessly, preserving the unsettling gap. I eased off the pedal. It decelerated in perfect synchrony. The tremor bloomed into genuine fear. This transcended mere carelessness. No sane person piloted a vehicle this way, certainly not through a tempest after dark. Rationalization offered flimsy comfort. Maybe they were sightless, using my taillights as beacons. But if so, why this unnerving, precise separation? Why not draw closer for safety? My fingers fumbled towards my phone. Call whom, though? Law enforcement. Report what? A phantom car, lightless in the rain. The absurdity echoed even in my frantic thoughts. While indecision warred within me, a highway bifurcation loomed. My usual exit, a quieter artery leading toward my small town, beckoned. A split-second impulse seized me. I bypassed my turn, holding fast to the main highway. Seamlessly, the shadow behind me adjusted its trajectory, cleaving to my new path. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs. No coincidence. This was pursuit. I pressed the accelerator firmly, urging my car far beyond the legal threshold. Effortlessly, the dark shape paced me. Regardless of my velocity, it clung to that exact, unnerving distance. Rain assaulted the windscreen, wipers battling valiantly against the onslaught. Road markings blurred into indistinct streaks, yet slowing down felt like surrender. I shot past other vehicles, their headlights momentarily flaring in my mirror. Each flash brought a desperate hope, confirmation, a clear glimpse of my pursuer, proof I wasn't unraveling. But the glare revealed only the sodden darkness where the car should be. Then, as the lights receded, the shadow rematerialized, constant, distant, unlit. Another exit approached. A reckless notion sparked. Waiting until the absolute final moment, I wrenched the wheel, hurtling across 2 lanes towards the off-ramp. Tires screamed their protest on the slick asphalt. A terrifying instant of near spin threatened, but control held. As I careened down the ramp, a glance in the mirror offered anticipated relief. Surely I'd shaken them. My blood turned to ice. It was still there. Impossible. How could they have predicted, reacted, unless they anticipated my actions before I even conceived them? The exit disgorged me onto a serpentine country road, picturesque by daylight perhaps, but now under the storm's dominion, a corridor of nightmare. Towering trees clawed at the sky, their branches skeletal fingers reaching across the narrow passage. The road coiled and twisted, each bend a blind gamble. I drove with desperate speed, taking curves that flung my heart into my throat. Yet, no matter how fast I fled, how recklessly I navigated the turns, the unlit car remained, an unwavering echo. My gaze snagged on the fuel gauge. The needle quivered precariously near empty. Panic had obliterated practical thought. 20 miles remained, perhaps 30 with luck, and the nearest sanctuary of fuel was an unknown distance away. As if sensing my vulnerability, the pursuing car suddenly surged forward. For the first time, the gap between us diminished. I pushed my laboring engine harder, acutely aware I was running on vapor. The motor whined its descent as I forced it up a steep incline. cresting the hill. A sight ignited a flare of hope. Headlights approaching from the opposite direction. Relief washed through me, potent and sudden. Another vehicle meant a witness, validation that this spectral pursuit was real, not a figment of stress and exhaustion. I flashed my high beams frantically, signaling the oncoming vehicle. It drew nearer, a pickup truck, its form solidifying in the rain. Just as the truck was about to sweep past, I risked a final glance in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was utterly vacant. I slammed on my brakes, the car fishtailing wildly on the wet pavement. The truck's horn blared, a startled bellow as it swerved around me, but the sound barely registered. My focus was riveted to the mirror, disbelief warring with the evidence. Empty road, no headlights, no lurking silhouette, nothing. I sat, hands trembling on the wheel, the rain drumming a relentless tattoo on the roof. Had it all been imagined? A hallucination born of fatigue and the storm's oppressive presence? A sharp tap on my window made me flinch violently. The truck driver peered in, his expression etched with concern, rain dripping from his cap's brim. I lowered the window. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Saw you flashing your lights, car trouble." My mouth opened, then clamped shut. How to articulate the unreality I'd just endured? I thought I saw something. I managed the lie, tasting like ash. "An Animal Crossing, maybe. Sorry if I startled you." He nodded, though skepticism lingered in his eyes. "Well, take it easy. Road's nasty tonight. Next town's about 10 miles up if you need anything." I offered thanks, and he retreated to his truck. As his taillights dwindled, I drew a ragged breath, forcing calm. Perhaps it truly was just my mind playing tricks. The rain, the lateness, the winding road, a perfect crucible for manufactured fear. I reached for the gear shift, ready to resume my journey, when my eye caught something alien on the passenger seat. A slip of paper. It hadn't been there before, I was certain. With shaking fingers, I retrieved it, a note penned in unfamiliar script. The words froze the marrow in my bones. "Thanks for the chase. See you again soon." My head snapped up, eyes scanning the oppressive darkness, probing every shadow, every recess around my car. Nothing, only the ceaseless rain, the skeletal trees, and the empty ribbon of road stretching into the night. I crushed the note in my fist, a brittle ball of dread, and flung it out into the storm. Starting the engine, I drove, pushing the needle past legal limits all the way home, not daring to stop until the garage door sealed me within its concrete embrace. That was 3 weeks ago. Night driving is a memory I don't revisit. My commutes are now varied, confined to bustling thoroughfares under the indifferent gaze of daylight. I've scoured my car for hidden devices, changed the locks on my house, even entertained the futile notion of relocating. Deep down, a chilling certainty resides. It wouldn't matter. Whoever or whatever occupied that lightless car wasn't tracking my vehicle. It was tracking me. And this terrifying game hasn't concluded. It's merely paused. So now, each nightfall finds me near a window, watching the street below, waiting for the inevitable moment a dark sedan, its eyes extinguished, turns onto my quiet road, because I know its arrival is merely a question of time, and when it comes, I intend to be ready. This time, the role of the mouse will not be mine. This time, I will be the cat. Amidst the cacophony of the antique fair, a sprawling bazaar of forgotten things where voices haggled over tarnished lamps and fractured porcelain, I drifted, anchorless. No connoisseur of relics, I was merely adrift on a tide of boredom seeking any shore. Then my gaze snagged, caught fast on a small looking-glass, no bigger than my palm, nested in an intricate cradle of darkened metal. Its surface swam with a milky opacity, yearning, it seemed, for a polishing cloth. Why my hand stretched towards it, compelled by an unseen current, remains a mystery. Yet reach I did, and as my fingers closed around the cool metal, a peculiar thrum resonated within me, a pulse of nascent curiosity tightening my gut in a knot I couldn't simply ignore. The vendor, a man preoccupied with dust motes dancing in the tense light, offered little history. Old, he ventured, likely salvaged from some dismantled estate. Without a word of barter, the notes left my hand. Later, twilight bleeding through the city haze, I returned to the stale quiet of my apartment. Keys clattered onto the entryway table. My jacket sloughed off onto a chair. A glass of water beckoned from the kitchen, but my thoughts remained tethered to the mirror, nestled still within its unassuming paper shroud. I retrieved it, placing it on the low coffee table where the lamplight caught the ornate carvings bordering the glass. My fingertip traced the filigree, discovering miniature valleys and ridges worn smooth by time. Scuffs marred the frame, minor imperfections that failed to diminish its allure. Cleaning the clouded face could wait. Its first true use came later that night. Perched on the edge of my bed, bathed in the weak glow of the overhead fixture, I held it aloft, my intention merely to inspect the glass for flaws that might warp my own image. A cursory glance revealed nothing amiss, but then a slight tilt, an adjustment to catch the light differently, and something flickered in the periphery behind my reflection. My head snapped around. Emptiness greeted me. The bedroom door stood closed. Silence reigned. Yet for a sliver of a second, the distinct, albeit faint silhouette of a person had materialized in the far corner. Heat bloomed in my chest as my pulse leaped. Tricks of the light, I insisted silently. The glass is ancient, imperfect. Days unfurled. I relegated the mirror to my dresser top, a silent sentinel. My interactions were brief. A cursory pickup to admire the craftsmanship, a thumb rubbed across the glass to clear a phantom smudge. Then, on the third morning, preparing for the day's labors, I reached for it to straighten my shirt collar. A fleeting glance, nothing more intended. I froze. Behind my own familiar features, a shape coalesced, sharper this time. The unmistakable form of a man, yet oddly contorted, bent forward as if burdened. His face remained indistinct, lost in shadow save for the lips stretched into an unnerving curve. A grin misplaced and chilling. My scalp prickled. A swift turn, a frantic scan of the room. Vacant. My chest constricted, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. With a trembling hand, I set the mirror down hard. The day became a fractured sequence of moments, punctuated by the persistent memory of that reflection, specifically the grin. Not amusement, not warmth, but something wrong. A secret, malicious mirth. Evening found me drawn inexorably back to the dresser. The mirror lay inert, deceptively placid. A long moment passed as I wrestled with the urge, apprehension warring with a darker curiosity. Curiosity won. Lifting it to eye level, I peered into its depths. My own face stared back, the familiar landscape of my bedroom stretching behind me. Then a flicker, a subtle shift, and he was there. Closer now, perhaps 3 paces behind me. The grin seemed wider, etched deeper. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor agitated his shoulders. No sound accompanied the apparition, yet a static charge prickled the nape of my neck. Down went the mirror again, my forehead suddenly slick with cold sweat. Sleep offered no sanctuary that night. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, the bent posture, the grotesque smile, imprinted themselves on the darkness. Around midnight, propelled by a rising tide of unease, I rose and retrieved the mirror. Its presence on the dresser felt too exposed. I slid open a drawer, buried it beneath a tangle of socks, and pushed it shut. A sliver of relief, thin and fragile, settled over me. Yet sleep remained elusive. Hours slipped by, my mind endlessly replaying that fleeting tableau. The figure standing so unnervingly close. Morning arrived, gray and unwelcome. I felt brittle, sleep-deprived. Caffeine, my only bulwark against exhaustion. Departure neared, the mirror almost forgotten, but some insistent subterranean current pulled me back. I rationalized. Perhaps Elias at the office could offer an opinion, confirm it was merely an optical anomaly, a quirk of antique glass. Retrieving it from its soft prison felt like handling something venomous. My palms grew damp, a hesitant glance into its surface. Only my reflection answered. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. I wrapped it carefully in a spare handkerchief, tucking it deep within my satchel. Yet Elias remained unconsulted. The words failed me, the explanation lodging in my throat. Elias, observe this time-worn looking glass. It occasionally conjures unsettling specters, you see. Absurdity silenced me. By day's end, resolve hardened. Disposal was the only answer. The dumpster behind my building beckoned, a yawning maw for unwanted things. But standing there, mirror heavy in my hand, that strange magnetism held me fast. I couldn't sever the connection. Defeated, I carried it back inside. Night fell again. I sat ensconced in the electric glare of every lamp I owned, the mirror placed centrally on the coffee table. A vigil. I watched it, waiting for some independent sign, some flicker in the glass itself. Nothing, just an object small and old. Hesitantly, my hand shaking slightly, I picked it up, raised it slowly. The instant my gaze met the reflective surface, he materialized. Immediately behind me, close enough to touch my shoulder, a profound cold permeated my body. His form seemed leaner now, attenuated, and I registered the subtle, disturbing motion of his fingers, a restless energy suggesting an eagerness I couldn't decipher. The grin stretched, threatening to crack the shadowed face. I dropped the mirror onto the table with a clatter that echoed in the tense silence. My stomach roiled. Gooseflesh erupted across my skin. I scrubbed at my eyes, blinked hard, scanned the room. Still empty, but the frantic rhythm of my heart refused to slow. The ensuing days were a blur of desperate experimentation. Glass cleaner yielded no change. A concentrated beam from a flashlight revealed only swirls in the old silvering. Pressing my palm flat against the surface detected no anomaly. Futile efforts. Each time I angled the mirror just so, catching the space behind me, he was there, relentlessly, incrementally closing the distance. By the fifth day, the weave of his shirt fabric seemed almost discernible, tattered, threadbare. Wrinkles webbed the corners of his eyes. He was older than my initial impression. Those eyes, dark pools absorbing the light, felt invasive when they locked with mine in the glass. Food lost its appeal. Meals became exercises in pushing sustenance around a plate, my appetite extinguished by a pervasive anxiety. Disposal resurfaced as a viable option. I carried the mirror to my car, formulating plans to drive miles away, to abandon it in some forgotten ditch. Yet inertia seized me again. The unsettling conviction persisted. Merely discarding it wouldn't sever the tie. He felt attached, somehow. Back into the apartment it came. My thoughts pinwheeled, a frantic dance of fear and confusion. A creeping dread became my constant companion, poisoning rest, fraying my nerves. Even away from the mirror, walking past a darkened window pane or a polished tabletop, I'd find myself glancing sharply over my shoulder, anticipating a phantom presence. One evening, summoning a reserve of courage I didn't know I possessed, I resolved to hold his gaze, to endure the reflection longer. Every light blazed. Every corner stood empty, confirmed and reconfirmed. I settled into an armchair, the mirror clutched tight. Slowly, breathing shallowly through my mouth, I raised it. He was there, eyes fixed on mine, grin stretched taut. The frantic drumming in my ears nearly drowned out thought. I fought the urge to look away. He remained still, yet conveyed a sense of infinitesimal forward momentum, a slow-motion encroachment. My hands trembled violently. Sweat traced cold paths down my ribs. No sound emanated from the reflection, but a psychic weight pressed down, heavier with each passing second. Finally, something within me fractured. I couldn't bear it. The mirror descended, my breath escaping in ragged gasps, throat painfully tight. I placed it back on the table, quickly draping a hand towel over its surface. Leaning back, I fought to regain equilibrium. My mind felt like shattered glass. My limbs throbbed with tension. A glass of water gulped down did little to soothe the internal tremor. Pacing the room, I felt waves of goose flesh rise and fall on my skin. Keeping the mirror shrouded offered a fragile peace. Knowing it was there, beneath the terry cloth, was a constant hum of unease, but sight unseen was manageable. I threw myself into the routines of work, lingered outdoors, minimized time within my own four walls. At night, my gaze would fix on the covered object, wondering if he waited beneath, patient, grinning. The familiar tightness seized my chest, the urge to peek a physical ache I had to actively suppress. Several times, I snatched it up, intent on shattering it against the wall, hurling it from the window, but always, I stopped. A primal reluctance, illogical yet potent, stayed my hand. A gut-deep certainty that breaking the glass would unleash something worse. This precarious truce held for nearly a week. Then one night, cutting through the apartment's profound stillness, a faint, dry scrape. I froze, every muscle locking, soft yet utterly alien. I crept towards the living room, heart slamming against my ribs so forcefully my vision momentarily swam. Reaching the coffee table, I saw it. The towel lay partially on the floor, disturbed. The mirror rested face up, reflecting the mundane glow of the nearest lamp. A shard of ice pierced my stomach. Slowly, fingers numb, I bent and retrieved it. Lifting it, bracing for the inevitable, I searched the reflection. Only the familiar contours of my living room stared back. He wasn't there. Not then. My mouth felt parched. A shaky, protracted exhale escaped my lips. Sleep was impossible. I spent the remainder of the night on the couch, the mirror heavy in my lap, turned resolutely away. Fitful dozes punctuated the darkness, each rustle, each creak jerking me back to terrified wakefulness. My shoulders ached, bones fused with tension. My eyes burned with fatigue. As dawn painted the windows gray, I succumbed. One last look. Steeling myself, I lifted the mirror. He appeared instantly, directly behind my reflection, so terrifyingly close, his eyes seemed to flick upward, meeting mine. A full-body rigor seized me. The grin looked sharper, crueler. It was too much. I set the mirror aside, breath catching in short, painful bursts. Cornered, trapped within my own home. And so I sit now at my kitchen table. The mirror rests beside me an arm's length away. My eyes keep darting towards it, half convinced it might stir on its own. A profound weakness suffuses my limbs. My stomach remains a tight knot of dread. No clear path forward presents itself. Seal it in lead, bury it deep, leave it anonymously at a charity shop. But the fear lingers, that closing my eyes tonight will conjure his image, that the next polished surface, the next window pane, will hold his reflection. That same aberrant grin fixed upon me. None of this yields to reason, and the adrenaline-laced anxiety forbids dismissal as mere fancy. For now, the plan is simple, born of desperation. Keep it wrapped, hidden from view. Perhaps confide in someone, seek counsel. Not for exorcism, nothing so dramatic, just a strategy to reclaim my sanctuary. My hands refuse to still. My skin feels perpetually clammy. A dull throbbing pulses behind my eyes. Even with the lights ablaze, relaxation is impossible. Every shadow writhes, every peripheral flicker demands scrutiny. Action is imperative soon. This state is unsustainable. But for this moment, I am paralyzed by a silent, suffocating fear. The mirror, a tangible weight beside me, holding within its depths the image of that hunched man, his chilling grin inching ever closer with each glance, and the inescapable certainty chills me to the bone. One lapse, one unguarded look, and he will be close enough to reach out and touch me. The apartment breathed around Eleanor, a constant exhalation of settling timbers and arthritic sighs. Nights were symphonies of unfamiliar groans, the sort one attributes to aged plumbing or wind whistling through skeletal frames. Noises amplified in the solitary hush, echoing in the hollows left by absent company. Acclimatization, she told herself, just the price of admission to this new solitude. Scarcely a week had passed since she'd surrendered to the faded allure of the borough, seduced by its historical whispers and an almost scandalous lease agreement. The flat itself, perched atop 4 stories of weary brick, promised little more than shelter, yet it possessed a certain decaying grandeur. Ceilings that soared towards forgotten heights, tall windows framing the indifferent city lights, and venerable hardwood planks that complained underfoot with every passage. That evening bled into the deep hours. Television flickered, a futile bulwark against encroaching silence, until finally, surrender. Teeth brushed, lights extinguished, Eleanor sank into bed near 1 o'clock, exhaustion a leaden weight. Sleep beckoned from the quiet depths, and then a sound, faint at first like a phantom echo. Was it dreaming? A delicate rhythmic percussion from overhead? But no, impossible. Hers was the uppermost floor. Only sky lay beyond the plaster. The building settling surely. Old bones groan. Yet the sound persisted, a measured tread, slow, purposeful, traversing the ceiling directly above. A frantic pulse kicked against her ribs. Eyes wide in the oppressive dark, she stared upwards. The cadence was undeniable, chillingly real. Pushing herself upright, mind racing, no attic, no access she knew of. The deliberate weight of each step echoed. Thump. Pause. Thump. As if someone paced, meticulously choosing their path on the floorboards above. Heart hammering, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. Logic scrabbled for purchase, a forgotten storage void. Vermin grown impossibly large. But the sheer gravity of the sound mocked such mundane explanations. Her phone became a trembling beacon in her hand, its beam slicing the gloom as she eased into the corridor. Overhead, the perambulation continued, unhurried, steady. Rooted to the spot, courage evaporating, a leaden dread anchoring her feet. The desire to know warred violently with the instinct to remain ignorant. Abruptly, silence crashed back in. Utter cessation. Eleanor held her breath, straining against the sudden void, but only the apartment's usual nocturnal murmurs remained. The phantom walker had vanished. Overwrought, she chided herself, the rational mind seizing its chance. Half-asleep imaginings. She retreated to the perceived safety of her covers, though sleep remained a distant shore for a long, unnerving while. Daylight chased away the worst of the spectral memory. Work provided its usual distractions. But returning that evening, crossing the threshold, an unwelcome guest greeted her senses. A cloying miasma, thick with the scent of decay, stale and vaguely fungal. A frantic check of the kitchen bins yielded nothing. The source seemed diffuse, yet strongest when she tilted her head, inhaling near the ceiling. An unsettling puzzle layered upon the night's unease. Throughout the evening, her gaze kept drifting upwards, anticipating. The night remained obstinately normal until the clock ticked past 2. Then the familiar rhythm returned, but amplified, insistent. The slow, heavy tread resonated through the plaster, a deliberate, almost taunting presence. Gooseflesh prickled her arms. Phone clutched like a talisman. Indecision paralyzed her. Contact Mr. Silas? Report. What exactly? Footsteps in the non-existent space above? Absurd. Police? For creaking boards? Before resolve could form, the pacing ceased directly overhead. A beat of silence, then thud. A single sickening impact, heavy, final, followed by a protracted scraping, the sound of immense weight being dragged across floorboards that shouldn't exist. Eleanor lay rigid, breath caught, a scream trapped in her throat. Visceral dread pinned her to the mattress as the dragging noise slithered through the stillness, eventually fading into an unnerving quiet that offered no solace. Sleep was unthinkable. She watched the ceiling until dawn painted the windows gray. Morning brought a desperate call to Mr. Silas. Eleanor recounted the noises, the impossible footsteps, the thud, the dragging, her voice tight with residual fear. Was there any space above, however small? Mr. Silas sounded perplexed, distant. No attic, no crawl space, just the roof structure far above. Pipes, maybe? He offered, the suggestion thin, unconvincing. He pledged to dispatch Gus from maintenance, but his tone lacked urgency, thick with skepticism. Days unfurled under a pall of quiet tension. The footsteps remained absent, yet the apartment felt occupied. A persistent sense of observation prickled the back of her neck, and the smell, that faint Swedish rot, clung stubbornly to the air. Then another night, deep within its quiet heart, a new sound emerged. Not footsteps, but a delicate tap-tap-tapping, seemingly against the ceiling plaster itself. Softly at first, then gaining confidence, rhythm, insistence. Tap, 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 impossible to ignore. Scrambling from bed, phone beam aimed high, Eleanor gasped. A hairline fracture snaked across the white plaster directly above, precisely where the tapping emanated. It hadn't been there yesterday, she was certain. As she watched, transfixed in horror, the tapping pulsed, and the fissure visibly widened, splintering outwards as if under pressure from the hidden side. Eleanor recoiled, a strangled noise escaping her lips. The tapping ceased, but the jagged crack remained. A wound opened in the ceiling. No further investigation was needed. No courage required summoning. Raw instinct took over. Keys snatched, purse forgotten. She fled, down the stairs, out into the indifferent streetlights. The apartment door left gaping behind her. She found refuge on a friend's sofa, the story tumbling out in incoherent, shivering bursts. The next day's call to Mr. Silas was pure insistence. He sent Gus. The report came back later. Nothing. No access point, no hidden room, no structural explanation for anything residing between her ceiling and the building's roof. Eleanor never crossed that threshold again. The lease was broken, the deposit sacrificed. Whatever paced and tapped and festered in the space above apartment 4B remained unknown, a chilling testament to the fact that some vacancies are profound and some thresholds are best left uncrossed. My awareness snagged on the old commissary about a fortnight past. I was lingering in the queue for the security turnstile when fragments of conversation drifted, peculiar acoustics emanating from the shuttered dining hall. Initially, I dismissed it. This sprawling industrial carcass where I clocked my hours was a fertile ground for rumor. Decrepit wings, forgotten chambers. The place sighed and groaned with age. Pipes rattled a lonely percussion. Vents exhaled metallic sighs. The very structure settled with nocturnal creaks. Such ambient noises never pricked my nerves. Yet this commissary, it felt dissonant from the outset. That afternoon, navigating the main artery of the building, a familiar chill raised the hairs on my arms, the overzealous climate control at work. The long fluorescent tubes overhead performed their usual stuttering ballet, a testament to deferred maintenance. Down the echoing expanse, I saw it. The commissary entrance, a slab of scarred steel weeping rust at its seams. A notoriously heavy door, its opening always unleashed a protracted squeal that reverberated unnervingly in the solitude. I leaned my shoulder into it, the groan ripping through the quiet, and stepped across the threshold. My first impression was of perpetual twilight, The overhead fixtures hummed, but many bulbs were dead eyes staring blankly down, casting the vast room in a murky gloom. Long refectory tables stretched in regimented rows, flanked by benches. Towards the far wall, incongruously, several tables bore place settings, plates, cutlery, though the hall was utterly deserted. Perhaps shift workers abandoning their break mid-meal, I reasoned, or a lapse by the cleaning rota. I didn't dwell, merely registered a faint tremor of unease, the sensation of trespassing on dormant ground. Around the midday meal hour, curiosity propelled me back. Did this relic actually serve a purpose? Most personnel frequented the newer, brighter cafeteria in the renovated sector. Yet those place settings. Stepping inside again, the emptiness was profound. An olfactory ghost haunted the air. Stale, vaguely organic, the cloying sweetness of rot. The atmosphere felt dense, making my eyes water against the musty miasma. More tables were now adorned with plates, and I noticed dark, rust-colored smudges blooming on the ceramic surfaces. The utensils, knives, forks, spoons, lay in precise, almost ceremonial ranks, their metallic surfaces clouded with a tarnished patina, as if untouched for epochs. I prowled the aisles between the tables, scanning for any trace of fresh sustenance, any logical explanation. No food, only those unsettling, oxidized stains reminiscent of dried gravy or perhaps the slow decay of the metal itself. From a distant corner, a faint, intermittent rattling surfaced. I drifted towards it. The kitchen, a separate domain behind a large service window, and a worn metal counter lay beyond. Peering through the grimy glass, I glimpsed antiquated apparatus. Hulking stoves, cavernous ovens, a refrigerator seemingly sealed by time itself. As I reached the kitchen doorway, the rattling ceased abruptly. My fingers found the light switch, flicked it. Nothing. A low electrical hum persisted, but the bulbs remained stubbornly dark. I stood motionless for a minute, listening. Sepulchral silence reigned, punctuated only by the erratic buzz and flicker of a single fluorescent tube overhead. No draft stirred the heavy air. No movement betrayed another presence, yet an undeniable sensation prickled the back of my neck. The feeling of being observed. I spun around, heart leaping. Only the vacant expanse of the dining hall met my gaze. A frantic drumming commenced in my chest. My palms grew slick, my throat constricted. Retreating a few steps into the main hall, the phantom smell of decay intensified, twisting my stomach into a knot. Later, when I recounted the state of the tables to my colleagues, their expressions ranged from indifference to mild concern for my sanity. Silas, one said, probably just debris left by some long-gone contractor. Another advised steering clear entirely, citing pervasive mold and structural rot in the old wing, warning it was a breeding ground for illness. None corroborated the sounds. The building was old, prone to groans, they reiterated. Doubt began to erode my certainty. Perhaps I was letting the atmosphere get to me. The following day, however, brought an auditory anomaly I couldn't rationalize away. I was traversing the corridor past the commissary late in the afternoon. Our shifts often bled into the early evening twilight. The passageway was silent save for the rhythmic echo of my own boots. Then it began. Distinct clinking sounds, the unmistakable chime of forks and knives striking ceramic plates. Not the isolated scrape of one or two diners, but a busy, layered chorus, silverware against earthenware, multiplied. It conjured the auditory landscape of a bustling restaurant, a stark contrast to the known desolation of the space beyond the steel door. The sound spilled into the corridor, raising gooseflesh along my arms. I rounded the final corner and stood before the commissary entrance. The clinking intensified, possessing a steady, rhythmic pulse, as if a congregation were truly engaged in a meal. My breath hitched. Hesitation warred with a morbid compulsion. My hand closed over the cold metal handle. I pushed. The door's familiar, tortured squeal sliced through the phantom din, and instantly, as if a switch had been thrown, the clinking vanished. Utter silence. My eyes swept the dim interior, vacant. The tables, however, were set anew, and their number had multiplied. I counted at least 12 distinct place settings dispersed across 3 tables. Each plate bore the same rust-hued blemishes. The cutlery seemed even older now, more heavily tarnished, yet arranged with meticulous precision, poised for imminent use. I advanced slowly, the frantic beat against my ribs echoing in the vast quiet. Overhead, the lights buzzed their discordant tune. The stale miasma was stronger, sharper than the previous day. Inhaling deeply, I caught a specific note. Leftover gravy, perhaps, abandoned to the heat. Festering, my stomach churned violently. Again, no actual food. Just this pervasive olfactory decay and the visual tableau of a meal eternally deferred. My eyes stung. I backed away, fighting a rising gorge. Who was arranging this spectral banquet? I scanned the floor, dust, scattered detritus, but no footprints, no sign of recent passage. Enough. I resolved to find someone, anyone in authority. Security, perhaps, but upon reaching their office, a minor emergency elsewhere occupied their attention, and my concerns were summarily dismissed. One guard offered a thin jest about the commissary ghosts having sport with me. His partner curtly advised me to cease exploring condemned sections of the facility. Frustration curdled with embarrassment. That night, sleep offered no refuge. The image of those plates swam behind my closed eyelids. In dreams, I heard the scrape of forks on ceramic, perceived indistinct shapes occupying the benches. I awoke with a jolt, drenched in cold sweat, sheets clinging damply, staring into the oppressive darkness above my bed. I fought to regulate my ragged breathing. I would return. Tomorrow. I needed to ascertain whether my mind was fraying or if something tangible, however unnatural, was unfolding. The following morning, feeling brittle and unrested, I made straight for the commissary. It was early. The corridors held the quiet expectancy of the pre-dawn shift. The heavy steel door stood slightly ajar, unusual as its own weight typically ensured a firm closure. Slipping inside cautiously, I was met by air thick with a new aroma, something acrid, burnt. My eyes adjusted to the gloom. The tables were dressed again, but the plates, they seemed chipped now, marred along the edges. The utensils bore deeper, darker stains. Had they always been so damaged, or was my perception warping? I rubbed my eyes. Then a whisper, faint as moth wings against my ear, seemed to breathe my name. Silas. My heart seized. I froze, every muscle taut. The whisper emanated from the corner near the kitchen service window. I moved towards it, step by deliberate step, my boots crunching on what felt like shards of broken porcelain scattered across the floor. Reaching the counter, I peered over its stained surface. The whispering ceased, though my name seemed to hang, an echo in the stillness. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. The hairs on my nape prickled. A tremor started in my legs. Leaning further, I scanned the shadows behind the counter. Nothing but a stack of dust-laden trays met my gaze. I confided in Reese, a work acquaintance, about the whisper. He chuckled, attributing it to exhaustion. "You're pulling too many doubles, Silas," he'd said, clapping me on the shoulder. But the certainty remained lodged within me, cold and hard. This wasn't fatigue. My next visit, I decided, would involve documentation, phone camera at the ready. After my shift concluded, I returned. Phone held aloft, video function engaged. Standing in the corridor, I drew a slow, deliberate breath and pushed open the groaning door. The phone's flashlight carved a weak, trembling cone through the oppressive dimness. My fingers felt numb with cold, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. Faintly, the clinking resumed, softer this time, more distant. I panned the phone slowly, capturing the rows of tables, the empty benches. No figures materialized on the small screen. Later, playback would confirm the sound hadn't registered either. Only silence overlaid with my own unsteady breathing. But I heard it then, a ghostly metallic scraping on ceramic. I approached the nearest table, directing the light onto the waiting plates. Dusty, the utensils bore faint discolorations like aged rust or some desiccated organic residue. Hesitantly, I touched the tine of a fork. The metal felt rough, gritty. Minuscule flakes adhered to my fingertip. Raising my hand, I caught a faint, sharp metallic odor. I wiped my fingers reflexively on my trousers, a wave of revulsion washing over me. I moved to the second table. Here, too, the settings were immaculate in their spacing, each seat meticulously prepared. Sweeping the flashlight across one plate, I noticed a dark smear near the center. Deep brown, almost black, with a cracked, crusty texture. My stomach clenched. Leaning closer for a better view, my phone's light began to flicker erratically. I tapped the device, but the beam continued its sputtering dance between illumination and darkness. Silas. The name resonated inside my skull again, an intimate whisper without a source. I whirled around, phone beam slashing through the gloom, convinced someone stood directly behind me. Empty tables stretched away into the shadows. A surge of raw panic propelled me backward, stumbling towards the exit. I burst through the door, hearing it slam shut behind me with its signature mournful squeal. I nearly collided with a startled colleague heading the other way. "Silas, you look like you've seen a ghost," he remarked, peering at my pale face. I could only manage a choked response about the commissary being wrong. He just shrugged, uninterested. It solidified then. No one else perceived this. They didn't care, or they believed I was unraveling. For the next few days, I actively avoided that wing, immersing myself in the mundane rhythm of work, hoping the experience would fade like a bad dream. But the commissary wasn't finished with me. The clinks and whispers began to bleed into my waking hours, insidious auditory hallucinations. I'd be in the brightly lit break room of the new wing, surrounded by chatter, and suddenly catch the faint, ghostly chime of silverware on plates. Asking nearby colleagues yielded only puzzled denials. My appetite vanished. The mere thought of food conjured that rancid phantom smell. Meals went uneaten, scraped into the bin. My hands developed an intermittent tremor. cold sweat would break out unexpectedly, triggered by the memory of those stained plates. After another week, the need for certainty, for tangible proof or definitive closure, became unbearable. I would go back one last time. Photos, videos, something concrete to show, to validate my experience. If the recordings revealed nothing unusual, I'd concede defeat, perhaps seek medical advice. I timed my visit for the late afternoon, when the low-angled sun occasionally pierced the high, grime-streaked clerestory windows of that section, offering slivers of natural light. I reached the commissary door. The corridor stretched silent and empty. Taking a steadying breath, I pushed it open, bracing myself. Inside, the tables were set yet again, but their number had swelled dramatically. It seemed additional tables had materialized, forming two entirely new rows towards the back. I estimated at least 20 place settings now waited in the gloom. My throat tightened. The miasma of stale decay was almost suffocating, like inhaling damp, rotting textiles. Covering my nose and mouth with my sleeve, I stepped forward. Phone out, recording initiated. I aimed the lens at the tables, panning slowly, then tilting up towards the buzzing lights, attempting to capture the full, unsettling panorama. I began walking the aisles, narrating softly what I observed, my voice trembling slightly despite my efforts at control. My hands shook, but I kept the camera steady. Passing each table, I saw fresh markings on the plates, some resembling new blooms of rust, others like viscous smears of long congealed sauce. I drifted towards the kitchen counter again, phone light probing the shadows beyond. That's when I heard it, sharp and undeniable. Silas. A sibilant hiss, less a whisper than an intimate, breathy summons. I jerked the phone around, desperately trying to capture the source. Nothing. Empty air, my chest constricted, breath catching in my throat. My pulse roared in my ears. The phone screen displayed only the dim, silent tableau. Tables, chairs, utensils, dust motes dancing in the weak light. Not a soul in sight. Then a sudden eruption of clinks and scrapes, louder, more frantic than ever before. Not rhythmic now, but a chaotic cacophony. Dozens of spectral forks and knives hammering against ceramic plates simultaneously. My scalp prickled violently. My knees felt watery, threatening to buckle. I stared wide-eyed at the tables, all perfectly still, inanimate. Yet the sound raged, an invisible, frenzied banquet unfolding around me. My phone, I knew instinctively, was capturing only muffled static. Silas. The name came again, a slow, deliberate whisper that seemed to curl right beside my ear. I spun around, fully expecting to find a face inches from my own. Nothing but stale, heavy air. My mouth was parchment dry. Swallowing felt impossible. My breath came in ragged, shallow gasps. The clinking intensified, reaching a fever pitch. It was too much. Primal fear took over. I turned and ran, my footsteps pounding, echoing crazily off the tiled walls. I burst through the door into the relative sanity of the corridor. The instant I crossed the threshold, the cacophony ceased, as if severed by a blade. Silence crashed down. My phone was still recording. With trembling fingers, I stabbed at the screen to stop it. I leaned against the cool corridor wall, panting, the device shaking uncontrollably in my grip. Later, forcing myself, I reviewed the footage. The video showed me pale and shaky, moving through the desolate commissary, my own voice a low, tense murmur describing the scene. but the audio track was eerily quiet. A faint background hum, likely the failing lights, but no trace of the intense clattering, none of the whispers that had seemed so terrifyingly real. My voice was there, clear evidence of my presence, narrating horrors the microphone refused to acknowledge. I still punch the clock at that sprawling complex. I still walk that corridor. The scarred steel door of the commissary remains a fixture in my periphery. I don't go inside anymore. Belief hasn't been forthcoming from my colleagues. It's stress, they suggest, or just the building settling, the old pipes singing their rusty songs. But I know the textures, the sounds, the smells. Sometimes, working late, a faint whiff of that specific decay drifts down the hallway. My pulse quickens, and I hasten my step. The phantom rattle of utensils echoes in the chambers of my memory. There's a lingering sense that something within that room reset the tables, laid out the tarnished silver, and continues its silent, patient vigil. I still hear my name on the edge of hearing, an invitation to a meal without end. When it happens, my chest tightens. My stomach twists into a cold knot. My skin chills. I tell myself not to listen, to never again cross that threshold. Yet, every day the memory surfaces, potent and unexplained. I touched those forks. I smelled the rot. I heard the call. Something waits in that commissary, perpetually prepared, and the chilling certainty persists. It's waiting for me. The silence of my apartment fractured, pierced by the jagged chime of the telephone at 3 a.m. I jolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs. An unknown number glowed on the screen. My thumb hesitated, poised to reject the intrusion, but some primal instinct, a low thrum of unease, compelled me to answer. Yes? The word was barely a breath. A voice responded, a rasping whisper that seemed to slither directly into my ear canal, etching ice onto my vertebrae. "I see you, Alara," it breathed, "and I'm coming." I didn't know it then, couldn't fathom it, but that spectral voice heralded the unraveling of my carefully woven world. The beginning of a waking nightmare that would stretch my sanity to its fraying edge. My name is Alara Vance. Until that disquieting summons, my existence had been unremarkable, pleasantly so. 28 years old, a graphic designer navigating the city's pulse from the sanctuary of my tidy apartment. My days were measured and deadlines met. Coffee brewed, familiar routes walked, predictable, safe. That single call detonated my peace, leaving behind a landscape of fear. Initially, denial offered a flimsy shield, a prank, surely, some bored teenagers, a misdialed number. Yet, sitting cocooned in darkness, the frantic rhythm of my pulse drumming in my ears, the explanation felt thin, inadequate. The whisper hadn't sounded juvenile. It had felt ancient, predatory. I rose, compelled to perform the ritual of security, checking the deadbolt, sliding the chain, drawing the heavy curtains across the glass like eyelids shutting against a dreadful sight. Peering through a sliver, I scanned the street below, half expecting a silhouette under a streetlight, eyes fixed on my window. Nothing, just the vacant asphalt, hushed and indifferent in the pre-dawn gloom. Sleep remained elusive. Every settling groan of the building, every distant wail of a siren became a potential footstep, a prelude to violation. When my alarm blared at 7, its cheerful insistence felt obscene. Exhaustion clung to me, a heavy shroud, yet the sunlight shafting through the blinds brought a fragile relief. Daylight diluted the terror, made it seem almost ludicrous. A stupid phone call. As I showered and dressed, forcing routine onto chaos, I berated my own paranoia. By the time I locked my apartment door behind me, I'd almost managed to relegate the incident to a bad dream. Then my phone vibrated again. Unknown number. A tremor ran through my hand as I lifted it to my ear. "Good morning, Elara." The same chilling murmur greeted me. "That shade of blue is quite striking on you." I froze mid-stride on the bustling pavement. My gaze flew wildly, scanning faces in the morning rush. How could they know the sapphire hue of my blouse? Where were they concealed? "Who is this?" I demanded, the tremor now audible in my voice. "What is it you want?" A dry, reptilian chuckle answered. "Patience, my dear. All will be revealed. For now, simply understand that I am watching. Always." The connection severed, leaving only the dial tones drone. I stood marooned on the sidewalk, a solitary island in a river of oblivious commuters, feeling utterly, terrifyingly exposed. This unseen entity knew my name, my appearance, my home. Nausea churned in my stomach. Work was forgotten. I called in sick, my voice a strained facsimile of illness, and navigated directly to the nearest police precinct. The officer listened with practiced sympathy, his pen scratching notes on a form, but his words offered little solace. Without tangible threats, without evidence beyond my fear, official action was limited. "Block the number," he advised. "Report anything further." Bureaucratic balm for a wound that felt deep and festering. Blocking proved futile. The calls persisted over the ensuing days, insidious tendrils reaching me from a constantly shifting array of unknown numbers. Sometimes only ragged breathing filled the line. Other times the whispers returned, laced with possessive menace. "You seem worn, Elara. Not sleeping well?" That reinforced lock you installed. A charming, futile gesture. "Your mother sends her regards. She worries, you know." That last sentiment almost fractured my composure entirely. My mother had succumbed to illness 2 years prior. How could this tormentor know such intimate grief? How long had this invisible surveillance been occurring? A suffocating paranoia became my constant companion. I ventured out only when absolutely necessary, my movements furtive. Locks were checked, rechecked, then checked again. Every unexpected sound made me flinch. Friends offered concerned inquiries, but how could I articulate this pervasive, gnawing dread? This sense of being perpetually observed by malevolent eyes. A week after the initial intrusion, a small parcel arrived. No return address, just my name typed starkly on a plain label. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Nestled inside on a bed of tissue paper lay a single red rose, its petals impossibly vibrant, almost arterial. Tucked beside it, a note also typed, "Soon, my love, soon we shall be united." That was the precipice. I couldn't endure it, not alone. Throwing essentials into a bag, I fled, seeking refuge at the home of Chloe, my closest friend. The dam finally broke there. the story pouring out in a torrent of tears and choked sobs. Chloe listened, her initial shock hardening into fierce protectiveness. She insisted we return to the police, the package now tangible proof of the harassment. This time, the authorities treated the matter with greater gravity. The rose and note were bagged as evidence, dusted for latent prints. Promises of increased patrols in my vicinity were made. A fragile quiet descended for a few days. No calls, no whispers, no unnerving deliveries. A sliver of hope began to germinate. Perhaps it was truly over. Chloe, eager to coax me back towards normalcy, persuaded me to join her for dinner at a nearby trattoria. We were walking back towards her parked car, the evening air mild, when my phone pulsed with that familiar, dreaded rhythm. Unknown number. With unsteady hands, I answered, activating the speakerphone. "Did you savor the pasta, Ilara?" The voice inquired, intimate and chilling. The arrabbiata sauce possessed a particularly appealing color, almost the shade of fresh blood. Chloe's face blanched in the ambient streetlight. We both spun around, desperately scanning the crowded sidewalk, the diners lingering outside cafes. The caller could be anyone, anywhere. Snatching the phone, Chloe's voice was sharp with fury. "Listen here, you twisted degenerate," she spat. "Leave Ilara alone, or I swear to God." "Ah, Chloe," the voice interrupted, smooth as venom. "How kind of you to participate, but this conversation is solely between Ilara and myself. Do try not to interfere." The line clicked dead. We stood frozen for a moment, clutching each other, the anonymity of the street suddenly feeling hostile, pregnant with unseen threat. We practically sprinted the remaining distance to her car, compulsively checking the back seat before scrambling inside and ramming down the locks. Later, huddled in the relative safety of Chloe's guest room, we dissected the possibilities. An old flame. None fit the profile of such sustained obsession. A disgruntled former client. Unlikely they'd possess such deeply personal knowledge. The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers. The following morning, Chloe slipped out to procure coffee and pastries. Her absence stretched longer than anticipated. Just as burgeoning anxiety prompted me to reach for my phone, I heard a key turn in the front door lock. Relief washed over me, potent and immediate. "Chloe," I called out, moving towards the living room. "You are not going to believe the outlandish theory I just concocted." Rounding the corner, I stopped dead, the air sucked from my lungs. It wasn't Chloe. Standing just inside the doorway, a grotesque parody of a smile twisting his features, was a man whose face sparked horrified recognition. Julian, Chloe's brother. I'd encountered him sporadically over the years, registering him as somewhat awkward, perhaps socially inept, but fundamentally harmless. Now illuminated by the terrifying context of the past week, his benign oddness warped into something monstrous. "Hello, Ilara," he said, and the voice, that voice, scraped against my nerves, achingly familiar. It was him. All along, it had been him. "Are you surprised?" Instinct screamed retreat. I backed away slowly, my thoughts scattering like startled birds. Where was Chloe? What had he done? Why? The word tore from my throat, rough and strangled. Why are you doing this to me? His smile broadened, a manic light flaring in his eyes. Because you belong to me, Alara. You always have. You simply weren't aware of it yet. He advanced a step. I turned and fled, sprinting towards the guest bedroom, slamming the door shut, fumbling with the lock. Outside, his footsteps were unhurried, deliberate, amplified in the sudden silence. You can't hide, Alara, he called, his tone adopting a sickeningly playful sing-song quality. I'm intimately familiar with this house. I possess a key, you see. It's merely a matter of time. My hand, slick with sweat, scrabbled desperately for my phone. Where had I left it? I needed help. The doorknob rattled violently. I shrank back, eyes darting frantically for any potential weapon. Just then, the sound of the front door opening again pierced the tension. Alara, Julian, what is happening? Chloe's voice, alive. A surge of desperate hope flooded me. Chloe, I shrieked. Call the police, it's your brother. My plea was brutally cut short by the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, followed by a sickening thud. Then silence, thick and absolute. Chloe requires a brief rest. Julian's voice drifted through the door, unnervingly calm. Now, where were we? The lock clicked open. The door began to swing inward. In that fractured moment, primal survival obliterated conscious thought. I seized the heavy bedside lamp, gripping its base like a club. As Julian stepped into the room, his silhouette framed against the hallway light, I swung with every ounce of strength I possessed. The impact resonated, a dull, satisfying crunch. He crumpled to the floor without a sound. I didn't pause, didn't look back. I vaulted over Chloe's still form lying prone in the hallway, burst out the front door and into the street, screaming, raw-throated for help. Neighbors emerged, doors opened, someone dialed 911. It was finished. The subsequent hours unfolded in a disorienting haze of flashing lights, police interrogations, and the sterile quiet of a hospital waiting room. Chloe was all right, shaken, bruised, diagnosed with a mild concussion, but ultimately unharmed. Julian was apprehended. The investigation revealed a long-standing, deeply rooted obsession, meticulously hidden for years. Chloe, devastated, had never suspected the darkness lurking beneath her own brother's familiar facade. In the days and weeks that followed, I grappled with the psychic aftershocks. Fear lingered, an unwelcome phantom haunting the edges of my perception. Shadows startled me. The ring of any phone sent jolts of adrenaline through my system. Yet slowly, painstakingly, supported by therapy, the unwavering solidarity of Chloe, and the kindness of other friends, I began the arduous process of healing. I discovered a resilience within myself I hadn't known existed. I had stared into the abyss of my deepest fears and had not blinked. I had survived. Now, months removed from the terror, I recognize the indelible marks left by the ordeal. But alongside the trauma, there are lessons learned about the deceptive nature of appearances, the crucial importance of trusting one's intuition, of heeding that small, insistent inner voice, whispering that something is profoundly wrong. My phone rings now, and I answer without the familiar clench of fear. It's merely a friend calling to share a laugh, to check in. As we talk, the normalcy feels hard-won, precious. Hanging up, I am struck by the distance traveled. The nightmare has receded, though its lessons remain etched into my being. I am a survivor, stronger, perhaps wiser, forged in the crucible of fear. Whatever challenges life may yet present, I know I possess the fortitude to face them, because nothing surely can eclipse the terror of those weeks spent stalked and hunted within the confines of my own life. I confronted that fear and I prevailed. That victory is mine, irrevocably.